At the 291st parade of the town of Easton on Memorial Day. A couple of guys were here that long ago, I don't know. We're going to start first with a prayer of Reverend Alan Brett, who also was born in Easton.
Let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, you are indeed the sole refuge in all hours of this world's travail, and the God of all the earth's nations. Our prayers arise as once again we stand before your grace and offer in our hearts the names of all of those who in the history of our nation's conflicts have offered all, their past and recent associations in their life, their thoughts and their cares and their anxieties of what were their final moments in life, and their future hopes, surrendering their lives for their homeland and their hometowns. We remember all who have died, whether known or unknown or missing in action, from the revolutionary birth of the freedom and dignity of the individual, and through the rages of the Civil War, through the two great wars, and other conflicts, including the present sacrifices in Afghanistan. Make us and our nation a continuing beacon of peace, and thus worthy of these brave souls. In our circle of reverent remembrance, we take heart in knowing that they have been raised up on the wings of eagles and dwell in your peace, as the psalmist so beautifully reminds us. We treasure your presence, your love, and your mercy, as we ask this in your holy name. Amen. Amen.
Next, the Girl Scouts there and Cub Scouts will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States.
Come on up. Line up quick, turn around.
Yeah.
Okay. Cut. Present. Come.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next we have a shot from team, Ed Hands.
Good afternoon. Usually I speak about someone who served or made the supreme sacrifice from the town of Easton, but today I'd like to speak about a man named Argu Scofield, who passed away last Wednesday at the age of 93. None of you probably know Arden, but for many, many years he came and visited Oliver Ames High School each and every year to talk about his experience as a POW in World War II. Arden was serving at the Battle of the Bulge as an assistant chaplain when his position was overrun and he and all his men in the unit were captured by the Germans, sent by boxcar to one of the terrible German prison camps, bombed on the way to the prison camp by the RAF. He was in the camp for 5 months and went from being close to 200 pounds down to 80 pounds. He was liberated by the men of General Patton, and he said for an assistant chaplain to say, God bless George Patton before he said thank God was a remarkable thing. But without General Patton and his push forward to rescue the men, he wouldn't have been with us. After he retired from being a school teacher, he got involved in the POW MIA actions after the end of the Vietnam War and decided that the best way to help us remember that no American should be forgotten who had died overseas, he thought it was important to tell his story. So for several decades, he visited Easton each and every year up until 2008, which was his last visit. We really thank him. He was no fighting man. As I say, he was an assistant chaplain, but his story of endurance and the stories of the men who were with him in the prison camps really brought home what it is to serve your country. He's a wonderful example of all our veterans who all have stories, and I urge the members of the younger generation to find a veteran and ask about their service. And I want to thank all the veterans today for their service. Thank you, veterans.
Next, Art Stecker will give you a short talk on freedom is not free.
Freedom is not free. I watched the flag pass by one day. It fluttered in the breeze. The young Marine saluted it, and then he stood at ease. I looked at him in uniform, so young, so tall, so proud, with hair cut square and eyes alert. He'd stand out in any crowd. I thought, how many men like him had fallen through the years? How many died on foreign soil? How many mothers' tears? How many pilots' planes shot down? How many foxholes for soldiers' graves? No, freedom is not free. I heard the sound of taps one night when everything was still. I listened to the bugler play and felt a sudden chill. I wondered just how many times that taps had meant amen, and a flag had draped their coffin of a brother or a friend. I thought of all the children, of the mothers and the wives, the fathers, sons, and husbands with interrupted lives. I thought about a graveyard at the bottom of the sea, of unmarked graves in Arlington. No, freedom isn't free.
Next we'll have a introduction of the parade marshal by Mr. Scofield.
I would like to introduce, on my right, Mr. Ken Wood, and I'll go into further details at our next stop. Mr. Ken has been selected as the honorary parade marshal for this year. All right, Kenny.
Next we have the laying of wreath by the selectman, led by Chairwoman Pauline Corona.
Use the mic, Kenny.
Use the microphone.
Next we'll have the reading of the war dead by Commander Al Smart and Commander Joel Moran.
Speak to the mic. Backing up if you're talking.
In memory of those who paid the supreme sacrifice in the service of their country, veterans who died during World War I, Second Lieutenant Oliver Ames, Jr.,
First Reformed France, July 29, 1918.
Winfield Skidmore Knowles.
Camp Givens, April 13, 1918.
Private George Francis Schindler.
Below Wood, France, July 18, 1918.
George Sherrill Shepard.
Villers-Soleil, France, May 4, 1918.
Chester Rice Smith.
Northeastern, October 1st, 1918.
Jeremy F. Sullivan.
Camp Upton, September 25th, 1918.
Lawrence Howard Swift.
Fort Bliss, October 18, 1918.
George Philip Workman.
Boston, December 15, 1918.
Veterans who died during World War II. Robert E. Chisholm.
Germany, April 17, 1945.
Paul E. Farrell.
Honshu Island, Japan, December 25th, 1945.
Robert F. Fernandez.
Korea, June 21st, 1948.
Robert E. Hagelin.
France, September 30th, 1944.
Albert E. Ham.
France, November 9, 1944.
Frank W. Hewitt.
England, May 11th, 1946.
Brian Nolan.
Pacific Arena, May 11th, 1946.
Oliver Ames Parker.
Hamilton Field, California, July 24th, 1943.
Anthony Ponce.
France, August 21st, 1944.
Evan Sharp.
Wilmington, Delaware, March 12th, 1945.
Patrick F. Shea, Jr.
Italy, July 16th, 1943.
Stanley H. Smith.
England, July 16th, 1943.
Anthony F. Souza.
Missing in flight off Charleston, South Carolina, April 11th, 1945.
John Texera.
France, October 26th, 1944.
Veterans who died during the Korean War. Robert F. Thompson.
Baltimore, Maryland, June 19th, 1953.
Veterans who died during the Vietnam War. Lieutenant Kenneth W. Scully.
Vietnam, May 26, 1970.
Edward F. Smith.
Vietnam, February 4th, 1967.
Robert J. Todd.
May 9th, 1967.
Veterans who died during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Staff Sergeant William J. Callahan.
El Anbar, Province, Iraq, April 27th, 2007.
Veterans who died in the service of their country. Leo P. Healy.
Nicaragua, February 17th, 1931.
Owen M. McGarry.
Germany, November 12th, 1988.
Elsa L. Trentholm.
Orlando, Florida, September 24th, 1992.
Sean M. Turco.
Florida, September 29th, 1992.
James T. Victoria.
Germany, November 24th, 1983.
Present. Oh.
Order, halt. Order, halt.
This concludes the service here. Thank you. And we'll reform and meet at Depot and Center Street. Thank you.
are the ultimate source of all strength and the creator of all goodness and human conscience, out of which flow the principles of tolerance, justice, individual freedom, and peace, which are the building blocks of the Constitution of our nation. Bless in us through your wonderful gift of remembrance, so that the reverent of heart may consecrate this day and hallow the courageous heritage of all of those who have stepped forth and who counted it not unwise to defend these principles and their people in times of danger and conflict, from our nation's very beginnings through all of the great wars up to and including the present day, where our people are in Afghanistan. We are humbled by the mysteries of life, and we know that we understand so little of your mighty purposes. Yet we do believe that the land and our constitution of our country is a gift, a divine gift. So as we remember, O Lord, and as we are truly humbled in recalling the sacrifices of the men and women of our land, we ask that you will keep alive in us the faith of those whose actions prove their trust, that their gift of their lives may be a shining torch of liberty for other peoples and for generations not yet born on this earth. May their sacrifice and conflict bring a lasting and just peace. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Next we'll have a pledge of allegiance by all the boys and girls scouts, of the girls and boy scouts, and the den. You can stay right there where it's nice and shady. I think you're in the shade somewhat. So, 1, 2. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next we'll have a selection by Ann DeSanto.
Thank you, Ernie. Please join me in America if you know the lyrics. Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of rain, for purple mountain majesty, above thy fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful, for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, oh America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining
Now we'll have a short speech by Washington South. Whatever.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is always a special day for me, this little convening of civic pride and remembering what was important in our nation and kind of re-identifying and reacquainting with ourselves with this noble experiment in democracy, this great republic. And it's very nice when I see people of all ages convene here, and it is a great expression of respect. It is our country at amongst its most noble moments, quite frankly, one of our nicest moments. Behind me is our Civil War monument. On April 12th, we recognized the 150th anniversary of the Confederate firing on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. So now we are in the sesquicentennial recognition of the Civil War. So for 4 years now, we'll be recognizing different events that happened 150 years ago in the Civil War. And I think this is important because we can focus on what makes this country great and why this nation was torn apart and why brother fought against brother. 47 men from Easton gave the ultimate sacrifice in the Civil War. I stood here one year and they were reading the war dead, and Representative Barbara Highland turned and she goes, "That's a lot of men from one town." I said, "Sure is." And one thing I wanted to also mention, that the first regiment from the Union to take the battle to the Confederacy was not from New York, it was not from Pennsylvania or the great state of Ohio or Connecticut or Rhode Island. The first regiment was from Massachusetts, and the first regiment from Massachusetts was the 4th Massachusetts. And most certainly had men in Easton in it, because it came from the towns around here. We'll never know, but I always wondered if the first man who took the battle to the Confederacy was a man from Easton. And it very well could have been. So today I want to read, as I always do, on Memorial Day, the Gettysburg Address. It is perhaps the most beautiful and poetic statement ever offered in American history. And while it does celebrate a military victory, it is not martial in spirit. Abraham Lincoln came to Gettysburg to call attention to what our nation fought about. He came to Gettysburg to readdress the common covenant of our people. And in 10 sentences, 276 words, in an address that lasted fewer than 3 minutes, he redirected our purpose. And he gave nobility to the bloodiest cause in American history. Here are the words that our President Abraham Lincoln spoke at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery on November 19, 1863. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will no longer remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. That from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.
Next, we'll have an introduction of the Honorary Parade Marshal by Mr. Silva.
I would like to introduce to you Mr. Kenneth Franklin Wood. Many of you know Ken in a couple aspects in town, very important as a matter of fact. The Wood Yardley rink right next to the center school is named after Kenneth Wood for all his work and presently engaged in many activities there. In addition to that, his wife Mary Jane and Ken manage the Easton Food Pantry, and we know how important that endeavor is for our community. I would like to read to you information on Ken's service record. Anxious to serve their country, Ken and several classmates at Brockton High School signed up with the Brockton 26th Division of the Yankee National Guard in the fall of 1957. After 2 weeks of summer training in 1958 at Camp Wellfleet, Massachusetts, Ken and his classmates were told they would be going to basic training in the fall of 1958. Having one more year of high school left, they were discharged until the fall of 1959. Finally, after high school graduation, Ken was reassigned and left for basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey in December of 1959. After basic training, Ken was assigned to headquarters company of the 4th Training Regiment shortly after and was assigned to the 716th MP Unit Company A at Fort Dix, New Jersey. While at Fort Dix, his MP company was present when Elvis Presley returned to base to be processed out of active duty. Ken completed his active duty in the Army Reserve obligations in the fall of 1970 and was honorably discharged. Great job, Ken. Ken is short on a few words today, I'm surprised, but Ken, there's no question about his activity in the community and how valuable that is. Thank you.
Next we have a selection by the All Grange High School Band. One and only All Grange High School. Next we have another selection by Ann DeSanto.
If you're able, please join hands and sing and join in singing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Okay. Next we have the reading of the war dead. Commander Smart and Commander Joe Moran.
In memory to those who paid the supreme sacrifice in the service of their country during the Civil War: Charles Bellows,
Martin Cunningham,
Daniel Donovan,
Thomas Duffy,
Samuel H. Gilmore,
John D. Haney,
E. Granville Howard,
William A. Lothrop,
Theodore Mitchell,
James McCullough,
John Phillips,
Seth Ramsell,
Pegleg Randall,
Michael E. Roach,
Albert Tyndall,
Charles S. Torrey,
Benjamin Brody,
Major Crockett,
Henry T. Drew,
Seth T. Dunbar,
Franklin Godfrey,
Edward W. Hansel,
James A. Humphrey,
Calvin A. Marshall,
John Mullen,
Jose S. Packard,
Minor E. Phillips,
Ansel B. Randall,
Phineas A. Randall,
Richard Severs,
George A. Tyndall,
Charles A. Willis,
Charles L. Britton, Jr.,
George H. Davis,
John Duffy,
Jason F. Eldridge,
John Gouling,
Manson A. Hill,
Addison A. Lothrop,
Michael Milrek,
Patrick McCourt,
William M. Packard,
H. Frank Poole,
John Randall,
John Richards,
Cornelius Slattery,
J. Manley Tinkham.
Thank you. Next we have a laying of the wreath by the selectmen. Colleen, come on up. Firing squad.
Present. Halt. Fire. Fire. Fire.
That completes our service for today. Thank you all for coming out. Nice warm day. But if you think back a couple of months ago, there was snow where you're standing now, and it was quite high. And this is much better. As usual, I'm going to have the final word, and that is amen.